So hi everyone and welcome to this Rise Up event on the Virtual Ocean Pavilion called Cross Regional Ocean and Climate Action, Bridging Science and Traditional Knowledge. I am Khadija Stewart. I'll be moderating today. I'm the senior campaigner at Rise Up, joining from beautiful, rainy, somewhat sunny Trinidad and Tobago. So I just want to thank you all for making space today and for joining us as we are here to spotlight frontline ocean and climate solutions from Latin America and the Caribbean, and to treat the ocean as what it is in practice, a borderless commons. We will also name what too often goes unnamed, and that is the colonial patterns that still shape who decides and who benefits. And our work together essentially is just to shift the reality with care, evidence, and shared power. And this session today is all about co-creation, and traditional and local knowledge sits next to science as a decision grid. When we braid live experience with monitoring and evaluation, we can definitely protect biodiversity, strengthen livelihoods, and build fairness into how choices are made. So we're not here to just chase shiny ideas. We are really and truly here today to lift what already works and shape it into models that travel across places without losing integrity. And so cross-regional, we're focusing on the Latin America and Caribbean region because right now, today, happening in Belém is COP30, which is in said region. So we felt like it would be very fitting to, really have a conversation focused and targeted towards there. And before we jump into the webinar, I would love to introduce you to Rise Up and Natalie. So I would hand things over to Natalie, who's our engagement and communications coordinator, to just give a brief intro into Rise Up before we dive into the conversation.
Thank you, Khadija. It's really an honor to be here and to have the opportunity to talk with these amazing guests. So just quickly, I'd like to start by introducing Rise Up. So we are a global network uniting diverse voices to influence and strengthen global ocean policy. And so all of our members have signed onto the Blue Call to Action, which was launched in 2019. And we are now a network of over 750 organizations from more than 67 countries committed to ensuring that the ocean decision-making processes and policies are shaped by the communities most affected by them. You can visit our website to learn more about the Blue Call to Action, and this is the team behind Rise Up, and also our 4 priorities: small-scale fisheries, high seas treaty, deep sea protection, and what we're focusing on today, which is the ocean climate nexus. And just a little bit about how and what we're doing. We work with smaller cluster groups throughout our membership. So we have a small-scale fisheries cluster and an ocean and climate cluster who Khadija will be introducing more about later. We've also got some exciting capacity development work coming in 2026. This year has been a big year with the UN Ocean Conference with high-level engagement. And then we also work with our broader network and release strategic communications aimed around raising awareness about global ocean policies. So if you are an organization working in the ocean space or the ocean climate space, then we invite you to join the network. You can do it via our website, and I will hand over to Khadija again to go deeper into it.
Yeah, so as Natalie mentioned, we have the Ocean and Climate Cluster. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today, just very briefly, is really to spotlight that this webinar was designed and created by the Ocean and Climate Cluster. And this essentially is a collaborative space rooted in justice, designed to connect frontline communities, grassroots organizers, and allies working at the intersection of ocean and climate. And it goes beyond policy influence to foster knowledge sharing, to scale local solutions, and to really build capacity and amplify storytelling. So at its core, the cluster is about shifting power and strengthening solidarity and driving tangible action on the ground, led by those most impacted and those most invested in like a thriving ocean and climate future. And the picture that you see here in front of you now are some of our cluster members. mostly from big ocean states or global majority countries, known also as the Global South. So essentially, with the Ocean and Climate Cluster, we have 5 thematic areas that we focus on. And again, it's all about frontline voices, really driving the decision-making process and having solutions at scale. And the areas that we focus on within Ocean and Climate, because Ocean and Climate could cover any and everything, right? So we really had to narrow it down. And these are the 5 things that the cluster decided that we will focus on, which is ocean and climate literacy, ocean stressors and coastal resilience, the just transition, as well as ocean-based industries, ocean-based climate policy and governance, and then blue carbon and ecosystems and nature-based solutions. So again, these are the thematic areas decided by the cluster that we really wanted to narrow in on. And with that, next slide, Natalie. With that, some of the things that keep coming up is that the rate at which policy is moving is not matching the realities on the ground. And there's so much different frontline communities that have solutions, that have projects, that have programs that they're working on every day. And the idea behind the cluster, again, with the storytelling component, is to really bring this to the forefront. And this is where we had Frontlines of the Blue Future, and it's essentially a solutions showcase. And you're going to hear from some of our speakers later on some of the solutions that they're working on as well. Again, to really show just what sustainability in the ocean space can and should be, as well as to really bridge that gap with what is possible and what is happening. So if you can take a look at this very incredible solution showcase. It was designed by Natalie. It's very beautiful. And it's just something to give hope and to show that, communities, especially those on the front line, are resilient and do have solutions that they're working on. There's just so much systematic barriers in place, but apart from that, they're still pushing through. So it's incredible to just have something to keep you going and keep you hopeful, right? Because for a lot of us, we are experiencing the impacts of climate change every day, and sometimes it's just good to know that there are positives happening because we see policy is not moving at the space that it should be. And this is international policy as well as national policies as well. So that's just a brief introduction on the Ocean and Climate Cluster. So if you're an organization, again, interested in joining, then feel free to do so. And like I said, this webinar was designed by the cluster. So these are some of the activities that come out of it. And as we jump into our session today, I am very happy to introduce Dr. Michaela Dave, and she is based in Vienna. She's a Vienna-based lawyer and art scholar, and she integrates legal practice with transdisciplinary research, bridging art, law, and science. Now, like I mentioned, she's a doctor, so she recently got her PhD. So she holds a PhD in art history, curatorial studies from the University of Applied Arts, Vienna, where her doctoral research explored decolonial ocean epistemologies through contemporary art and curatorial practice. Building on this intersection, her expertise lies in deep sea protection from mining and ocean governance, with participation at the International Seabed Authority and UN Ocean conferences. And currently, she's a research associate leading EU projects on the blue economy in maritime law and policy. And she's also a member of the Confluence of European Water Bodies advocating for nature's legal rights, and the Deep Currents Collective, which envisions the deep seabed as a relational world sustaining human and more than human life. So Dr. Michaela Dave has published, she has presented, she has done the works, and she is here today to really share with us the importance of shifting our mindset as it relates to ocean governance, decolonizing the ocean space, and how we could bridge that gap between science and traditional knowledge. So Michaela, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Khadija, for the kind words and introduction. Hi, everyone. I'll just share my screen and hopefully it works. Can you all see my screen? Okay, perfect. All right. Again, I would like to thank the Rise Up team for this lovely and amazing introduction. And I really am looking forward to all the speakers on the panel today. But since I'm here and I just want to sort of probably provide a framework as to our discussion today on ocean and climate themes. And so I'd like to just begin with my slides. Yeah, I would just like to begin with this concept of climate that we all try to grapple with. And growing up in India, I'm from India, I've always recognized it through the scorching heat, dryness, or humidity in the air. And somewhat what's helped me through trying to understand this big concept is through a scholar called Timothy Morton. He described climate change as a hyperobject. It's like a phenomena so vast, distributed, and stretched across scales and time. And so ocean, in fact, is actually sitting at the center of this hyperobject of the climate. And the ocean is absorbing at least 90% of the heat and a quarter of carbon dioxide, which regulates weather and planetary circulation. It also contributes to temperature patterns. At the same time, climate change is also shaping the ocean in measurable ways. There is, of course, ocean warming, which now extends deep into the water column. There's marine heat waves, which is increasing in frequency and duration. And recently, the IPCC, which is a scientific body, has confirmed that there are long-term declines in oxygen levels, acidification, disruptions in Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, and specifically those who are on the front lines of climate change and ocean, the Pacific and Caribbean, through data and through satellite imaging, they show that there's sea rising levels, and there's, of course, shifts in fisheries distribution. And all of this is, of course, documented through indigenous voices and practices as well. And so all of this tells us that there is, of course, a global shift in the ocean, but also as well as the climate. But how do we get about tackling this in terms of its urgency? We have certain sort of structures in place at the top level, which is a governance structure for the ocean especially, and also, of course, for the climate. And I just want to go back into trying to understand together with you how that governance framework really works at the moment. While science has told us what is happening to the ocean and the climate, there's, of course, these regulations that are kind of framing and building a different kind of world. The main treaty in international law that we recognize is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It was negotiated between 1973 and up to 1982 when it came into being. And this is really reflecting of a Westphalian model that treats the ocean, which has a lot of territories within the ocean. It partitions the sea into territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, and so on and so forth, with the high seas. And each of them have specific rights and obligations. And so the high seas specifically, which is outside of the national jurisdiction, is prescribed as a common heritage of humankind, which means it is accessible, it's applicable to the global commons. And all of this, these provisions assume that stable coastlines and predictable conditions are based on these sort of frameworks and rules of law. Whereas what we are seeing now with sea level rise, it's destabilizing baselines and therefore affecting maritime zones. It's creating more legal and geopolitical uncertainties that the Law of the Sea Convention is not yet equipped to address. And even when it comes to the high seas for the common heritage regime, where it needs to be ensured that there is equitable benefit sharing among the global commons of resources, there's, of course, less regulatory frameworks like the International Seabed Authority and even in the BBNJ treaty that was recently launched. And in the meantime, while there is this sort of Westphalian legal system in place, which is creating all these ocean zones in the waters, indigenous governance systems, more so with traditional ecological knowledge, have been absent and largely unrecognizable and negligible in all of this international binding in law. So therefore, I just wanted to underpin that when there is this sort of emphasis on this sort of model of law and negligence of indigenous value system, what happens to ocean climate action and why does that matter? So legal gaps in such frameworks and ocean governance is basically also responsible or probably also having some stakes when it comes to regulating majority of the climate processes as well. And sometimes it's also separating not only the zones within the oceans, but also with regard to climate processes as well as ocean processes. And I think together with you all, why we are here, we understand and we are trying to take cognizance of COP30 at the moment, where all the state members ratified two different climate regimes, international regimes. What they are trying to do and coming together is trying to embody sort of legal regimes, but as well as when we, as representatives of local people and communities on the ground, when we are also taking or making sense of all of this, we're also noticing that a lot of the ocean climate interface sits outside of the central decision making, which is being discussed in these very halls of the climate conferences. And so what's really happening is that delegations that are representing, in fact, coastal, indigenous, and island communities, they are frequently struggling with access, mandate, or capacity, which is, of course, resulting in underrepresentation in negotiation processes of these conferences. And so the discourse which is coming from the ocean together with the global climate governance, it's tending to be quite vulnerable, but also, again, it's not being fully integrated in the negotiations processes, which results in, of course, a lot of governance gaps. And that's why it's really important for us to take cognizance of the COP30 and why that matters and why ocean climate interface is at the moment. What this is really telling us is that data from different sources, whether it's IPCC, Carbon Budget, NOAA, that the ocean warming and acidification are proceeding on trajectories that will alter marine ecosystems, food systems, coastlines within this current generation and also for the future generations. The potential weakening of major circulation systems have implications on temperature regulation far beyond the ocean itself. There's coral reef decline, which is reducing coastal protection, biodiversity, and fisheries. And of course, there's sea level rise that's affecting maritime entitlements, national jurisdiction, and the legal status of low-lying states. So these are the scientific processes that are taking place that is directly affecting legal consequences. Meanwhile, of course, understanding science has to come with also acknowledging the value of indigenous and local knowledge systems across the Caribbean. Traditional fisheries knowledge documents changes in spawning times, migration routes, and reef assemblages that align with ecological modeling. And in the Pacific, indigenous navigation, interpretation from tides, and long-term observation provide really climate impact data that complements satellite-based and instrument-based science. These are systematic knowledge practices built on long-term observation, and they do, in fact, strengthen scientific data and also offer finer scale insight into ecological change that many monitoring systems cannot acquire or capture by science. And so it's really important for us to look at science as well as the value of traditional knowledge. But the framework which I really want to bring to attention today is the decolonial ocean, which is a subject for me, but also an embodiment of me and also you. What the decolonial ocean does is that it helps to clarify what is missing in current governance. It challenges divisions, fragmentations, resource-centric approach of how Westphalian ocean governance is modeled. And it's basically coming from a place of relational points of view, but also relational ways of coming together. It's historically enriching and rooted with the global South communities, and also it forms its own forms of authority as well, which predate state system, which really encourages and of course acknowledges indigenous coastal knowledge as well. I really look to scholars like Edward Camus Brathwaite, who comes from the Caribbean, where he's described the ocean as the unity is submarine, which is a really evocative way of picturing ourselves connecting with the ocean. And I also, of course, I'm inspired by Pacific thinkers like Teresa Taiwei, and how she articulates the sea as a region defined by movement and relation rather than borders, that we cry salty tears. And that really embodies the way in which we connect to the ocean as with our kin. And so these perspectives essentially highlight that governance is actually based solely on not territorial jurisdiction and attraction, but in fact, it's culturally enriched and also historically quite capturing where and how we come to try to understand the ocean in whichever way we want to, and collectively so. I also wanted to bring another framework today, which is called tentacular thinking, which is a way in which we can think about these massive, what I already mentioned about concepts that I call or scholars call the hyperobject of ocean and climate. Tentacular thinking is, in fact, a scholarly way of thinking by a scholar called Donna Haraway. This was a useful conceptual framework that I felt which was quite interesting to me, and hopefully it might resonate with you, that it understands systems which are interconnected between human and other than human. It's multi-scalar, it's got many layers. It's recognizing that ocean processes scientific systems, indigenous knowledge, and legal frameworks are all intertwined. Our stories, narratives, are all part of this as well. It's like a governance model that you could think of, where it integrates many disciplines, multitude of knowledge and authorities, and adaptive legal structures that can respond to moving baselines or shifting ecological thresholds. It really helps to try to define our relations with the ocean and climate in a way that keeps it moving and flowing and inclusive and adaptive as well. I just want to also highlight that there is, of course, a keenness through this panel, and of course, and through this momentum, a way to bridge knowledge systems in practice, because we all come from different stories, narratives, and knowledge streams that we know and can acknowledge that we are learning and unlearning with. And we are all bringing it together to have better imaginaries in place for a better world. And so we are already seeing what it looks like when knowledge systems work together across coastal and deep ocean space. Climate models are now being informed by indigenous indicators like I said, by tides, winds, and behavior of species. Communities are leading their own coastal and reef protection through marine protected areas and customary marine tenure, or young people across the Pacific and Caribbean, and of course Latin America are sharing observations, noting down what kind of new forms of knowledge are being encircled around, and climate responses with one another. And in both coastal and deep sea advocacy, science is side by side with indigenous perspectives and priorities. However, we are far from really achieving the world that we really dream and hope for, because there are, of course, structures in place that impede these sort of positive goals, which are, of course, funding rarely reaches these coastal communities who are on the ground. While our knowledge of the ocean is improving faster, more than financing the ocean work itself, there's still, of course, carbon-centered policies in place that overlook realities of the ocean, but also the climate. So until there's enough support, resources, and proper decision-making power, there is a long way ahead of us, but not lost, because there's a few things that we could think of when it comes to thinking about governance, thinking about coming together through different knowledge streams. And I would just probably aspire to contribute something in terms of some ways in which we can achieve that, with concrete steps, that is recognizing indigenous governance as legally relevant and not merely consulted, integrating indigenous ecological indicators into climate and ocean science, increasing representation of coastal and island states in climate negotiations, adopting precautionary and ecosystem-based approaches in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and of course, developing governance tools that accept fluidity rather than stability, or both. So these are just not practical nuggets of how we could imagine our world to be better through the framework of adaptive and shifting governance models. But of course, we're here to try to aspire to listen to one another, to learn from one another with better scientific evidence for the ocean and about the climate, and also, of course, encouraging and valuing indigenous knowledge, and how through tentacular thinking and decolonial ocean we could imagine that reality to come forward. So I just wanted to quickly say that to move forward through this difficult climate conference, and of course, like also all of and different forums, and also people on the ground to policy level, let's protect our oceans and also be mindful about our climate shifts and change, and share our stories. Like all of us are here to share our stories. And thank you very much. I pass on to Khadija, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Oh my gosh, I'm just like, where do I begin? How do I digest everything that you just said? You just dropped such incredible gems with us, and so grateful to have you here to share. I know it's late in Vienna now, so really appreciate you coming to share and talk with us. And the thing that stuck with me the most, or maybe the thing I remember the most, was that you said we cry salty tears, and really just goes to show like how much we are a part of the ecosystem and we are not separate and above it. And so it's so important for us, like you said, to continue learning and unlearning some of these systematic barriers that are in place, and then how we could really and truly connect knowledge systems with scientific systems, whilst dismantling some of the colonial legacies that exist within the overarching governance related to ocean and climate. So really grateful for you to share with us. And I will jump straight into the next speaker with the panel. So, you shared with us a lot on ocean governance, on UNCLOS, on systematic systematic knowledge practices, about the science, and about really incorporating the two. And we have four very sound, solid examples of what it looks like when we combine the science with the traditional knowledge. So I will jump straight into our first speaker, Damien Nicholas. He is a climate justice advocate from Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean, and with a background in philosophy and public policy. He co-founded my French is terrible, so please don't come for me. But he co-founded the Observatoire Terre Monde. I hope I got that correct. If not, then forget I said anything. And this is a research action center focused on the political ecologies of French overseas territories. His work examines French subnational island territories as key spaces for climate justice, highlighting how decolonial perspectives are essential for shaping fair adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage policies in large ocean territories. He's also a fellow of the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy, and he has also served as an ocean policy coordinator at the Caribbean Sea Commission, co-designing a regional science policy interface on the sargassum crisis. His current advocacy advances climate diplomacy among subnational island jurisdictions, working to ensure that overseas territories help shape a unified, equitable response to the ocean and climate crisis, and that their voices are properly recognized. So, Damien, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Khadija, for this opportunity. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see it on the screen?
Yes, all good.
Okay. So, thanks to Michaela for a presentation on the decolonial aspect of ocean governance, because I'm really going to also questions how within the ocean space we still have a lot of colonial patterns, especially because most of non-sovereign territories in the world right now are ocean territories. So this presentation is really going to be about how we confront the colonial patterns in representing non-state actors, especially non-sovereign island states in ocean-based climate action. So first, I will speak from my positionality. So I'm from Guadeloupe, a French Caribbean archipelago that which is shaped like a butterfly. It's located nearby Dominica and Montserrat and Anguilla and Antigua and Barbuda. This is like a upside down version of my Caribbean map to really showcase how we can also sustain the colonial narrative of how do we see our ocean and island territories. I'm one of the co-founding member of the Observatoire Terre Monde, the Earth World Center to transcribe in English, which is the Earth World Observatory is a decolonial an environmental justice action research center on the French overseas territories and the neighboring regions. So we're really looking at the political ecologies of what these territories are actually experiencing. So our action was born of a shared desire to highlight the diversity of ecological issues inherent in France's so-called overseas territories and their neighboring regions at a time when ecological imperative requires from us collective rethinking of our ways of living on Earth and living together. And so the Observatoire aims to provide a forum for the study, for the action, the dissemination of research, knowledge, and the ecological issues inherent to these so-called overseas territories. The rest of the world. And the association's activities are currently based on 5 thematic areas. So the interdisciplinary and international academic research, the education and awareness, the advocacy, activism, and action research that I'm part of, and also the archiving and monitoring process. I would like to describe our project with this quote, as a Batista's quote, a world where many worlds can actually fit. That is the project of a pluriverse, a world that is not just one geared toward sustaining capitalism, but that sees actual variations of a world of many worlds within one. So some of our recent works. So recently we've published a Caribbean Spotlight Zine, which uplift the voices, youth voices from non-sovereign states and territories in the Caribbean. And I'm going to try to do next year one which will be included voices from also the Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean as well. So let's start with a definition. What are the overseas territories or the categories of the subnational islands jurisdiction? So I would say that in my work, I try to define what are the climate margins on the current climate regime. And usually there are four categories which are oftentimes tied to two criteria, such as a lack of sovereignty or the lack of political participation, or either the climate vulnerability that those communities or categories are facing. So first, we have the indigenous communities, and they are at the centers of the COP30. We also have the global south, which can include like the post-colonies, the developing countries, or also the least developed countries. We also have the small island developing states, as well as population which are exposed to climate apartheid, new population that will be experiencing climate apartheid within environmental displacement. We also have these specific categories of what we are calling the non-sovereign territories. And within those non-sovereign territories, a majority of them are mostly island territories. So by climate margins, I don't mean categories which are marginalized because they're not accessing environmental resources. Actually, they're often hotspots of worldwide biodiversity, but they are lacking the access to the right decision tables. So the majority of non-sovereign territories are locating in world oceans and seas. We have almost like 55 actual SNIJ would be the in the comparison to the small island developing states. So oftentimes they are also sharing the same climate vulnerability that small island developing states are facing in the climate governance. And those ocean, in the case of France, the French overseas countries and territories actually makes France the second largest maritime power behind the United States, with an exclusive zone of 11 billion of kilometers. They represent 97% of the country's maritime space. So here you have, sorry, the map is a bit choppy, but you can see a worldwide map of some of the subnational island jurisdiction across the world, from the Caribbean to the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Would say that half of the island ocean territories are actually not seas, but still subnational islands jurisdiction. So what is the main criteria to define those subnational islands is the fact that there are various constitutional and political arrangements with the former metropolitan states. And so the relationship with SNIS as to the constitutional center is often similar to how we could have, for instance, nation-to-nation relationships between indigenous nation and a settler state. So what are the consequences of this framework for ocean climate action? So while these territories face similar climate vulnerabilities as the sister island states, they tend to be underrepresented within multilateral climate negotiations and less consulted when it comes to ocean and coastal policy planning. Oftentimes because they have been integrated within a very complex multi-level governance framework. For instance, the French overseas territories are also part of the European Union, and some have various degree levels of integration within that system, which makes it very difficult sometimes to have the same policies for the same territories or the same policies as mainland France. So it's a very complex governance framework when you're trying to define how to have integrated ocean management policies, or to have governance that takes into consideration the traditional knowledge of the indigenous communities or the people that are in those overseas territories. Here you have, again, an upside down map of the French overseas territories. This one's a bit French, but you can see that you have in the south, well, the north actually, France in Europe. You have French Polynesia, which is the size of the European continent, actually. You have French Guiana in South America. You have Guadeloupe, Saint Martin, Saint Barthélemy in the Caribbean. You have the Antarctical Austral territories near the Antarctic. You also have Réunion Island, Mayotte, and New Caledonia, and also Wallis and Futuna. So these are in total the 13 French and European overseas territories. Those territories are also they're also like hotspot of biodiversity. We can see that in terms of climate adaptation, and especially in a sense of coastal marine ecosystem, they are also hosting a lot of the mangrove ecological services for France. A number of traditional ecological knowledge also practiced in the relation to those territories. For instance, you have the Orari, which is in French Polynesia a sustainable practicing of fishing in the coral reef. You also have the Jafira fishing practice in Mayotte. Those knowledge are sometimes being challenged within the how sustainable ocean policy could be defined in those territories. So I'm going to shift to how could we actually bridge this gap of representation of the French overseas territories within the climate negotiation and multilateralism. And I will give an example of the Sargassum as a case where we're actually seeing in my territory, Guadeloupe, a beginning of governance framework that goes outside the border of these overseas territories, because overseas territories are often constrained as non-sovereign jurisdiction to partake into the climate negotiation process. And within that case, the Sargassum is crisis. So it's transboundary marine issues. Since 2011 in the Greater Caribbean, the region has experienced massive influxes of Sargassum, an invasive algae originally located in the Sargassum Sea, the North Atlantic area. And it has been changing currents, mainly because of the climate change and the collapse of a critical Atlantic current to increase, and also the increase of nutrients based in marine litter. And these blooms have been recognized as a climate-related crisis at the declaration of Antigua, Guatemala by the head of summit of governments and states. And it has multiple impacts, from tourism, from fisheries, from public health impacts to marine biodiversity. The Sargassum threatens the sustainability of livelihoods of coastal communities and the ecosystem across the region. So throughout my research, I reframed the Sargassum crisis as what we called a negative common. So a negative common, or commun négatif en français, is a concept that has been framed by in environmental philosophy to describe a common good that binds us not by choice, but actually by constraints, especially for describing nuclear waste or biohazards. How do we come as a society to challenge and appropriate collectively something that we don't actually want to take care? So this is why I'm actually using that concept. And in the context of the French Caribbean, the Sargassum has been defined very differently than in the other, the neighboring islands. Actually, oh, yes, that was the next slide. So actually, the Sargassum has been framed as a public health and environmental controversy in these territories. This is mainly because of a long history of environmental injustices. So in the early 2010, the French Caribbean has experienced several protests to denunciate the lack of Sargassum management by the state, with citizens and local scientists framing it as an environmental and public health concern. This narrative of Sargassum as an environmental controversy has been especially developed in the French Caribbean, given the fact of the strong environmental justice concerns. In Guadeloupe and Martinique, more than 90% of the population has been exposed to a widespread pesticide used in the bananas plantation. This has been described as a state environmental scandal, and in the French Caribbean has basically framed how the citizens are seeing the relationship with the state when it comes to environmental management. So this environmental state conduct has set a basis for how French Caribbean sees environmental concern, and especially how the environmental narratives are rooted in power relationships. So some studies have revealed even that the sargassum inundation, when they come near shore, are actually sucking up a bit of the pesticide, which increase the concentration in the water. So we can actually see that there's a linkage between an environmental concern that is rooted in justice and also a climate crisis that actually makes it a concern of public health and environmental controversy for the citizens. So in the face of this environmental and public health controversy, the sargassum crisis has been framed as an opportunity by Guadeloupe local institutions to develop the sustainable management strategy. So from this grassroots movement, Guadeloupe as non-state actors framed sargassum as a priority for its external action and regional cooperation strategy, and seeing the opportunity also to exchange best practices. One of the key takeaways that we could have from this experience was in 2019 when Guadeloupe hosted for the whole region the first international sargassum conference. And since we have seen a lot of development in kind of policies and frameworks to tackle this challenge. At COP28 in Dubai, the Guadeloupe launched with the French state an initiative, an international initiative to call for an international mechanism to define how, to define a governance framework to basically have a better sustainable management of sargassum. At IUCN, they also defended a motion to establish an international governance framework on sargassum again. So as a non-state, as a non-sovereign actors, what we're seeing with Guadeloupe is the strategy to actually bypass the Westphalian definition of ocean governance mechanism and to go in within those spaces and to promote integrated management. The most recent strategy that we've seen is the South Sea project, which is the sargassum regional strategies for the ecosystem-based action in the Caribbean. And what we could understand from these strategies is that the subnational island jurisdictions are defining, they might be shaping a new understanding of what it means to be sovereign, a post-Westphalian understanding of sovereignty as vulnerable ocean territories in the face of climate change, which is grounded in the ability to choose their interdependencies in an interconnected world. Well, thank you for listening. Khadija?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was muted, yeah. And I was,
oh, sorry.
I was giving my closing remarks and I was busy muted, but thank you so much, Damien, for really and truly highlighting the realities of overseas territories and, you know, traditional ocean governance frameworks, and then what that means and what that looks like for an overseas territories, and how despite that, there's still avenues and ways to like move forward, have solutions, mobilize grassroots, and still kind of technically fight the system and somewhat create your own system along the way. So really appreciate you sharing. And in the interest of time, I will jump straight to the next speaker. We have Barbara Lucy Carvalho, and she is an Afro-descendant artist and researcher with a master's degree in performing arts based in Germany. As a decolonial scholar, she specializes in Brazilian Afro-diasporic culture with a focus on ocean heritage. She's the co-founder and coordinator of the Escuna Creativa project. I feel like I butchered that, which, because I assume it's in Portuguese, but anyways, which integrates art, sustainability, and immersive educational experiences abroad a cultural shift. She's a member of the European Ocean Coalition and a mentor for future women leaders in the blue economy. Over the past 15 years, she has collaborated with Quilombola communities in Bahia, promoting anti-racist education, cultural preservation, and environmental awareness. Barbara works closely with coastal indigenous communities to co-create collective experiences that promote connections with transatlantic identities, creativity, and social inclusion. So Barbara, the floor is yours, and just a reminder of the 10 to 15 minutes. Barbara, are you there? Did we lose you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to show my presentation. Can you see the full screen, the full presentation? Yes. So
Yes.
hi everyone. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and for me, to be honest, it's a new environment to share my work as an artist and also researcher. I have been working with Quilombola community. So Quilombo is a word that comes from Bantu language that is based from the political movement in my country, in Brazil. I'm from Salvador da Bahia, and I work in Germany now since 15 years. So I'm somehow always traveling crossing the Atlantic to do this work here in Europe, in Germany, performing arts, but always coming back to where I come from. And for me is a community that, a way of living that I have discovered more and more through the research, through the work closer with them. It's more than an alternative way of living, but it's really, for me, the future of having sustainable society based in democracy. So my presentation today is going towards ocean literacy and the challenges that such communities are facing, and keep on with the existence, with the knowledge, and how this knowledge can somehow inspire other groups of people, scientists, other artists to work for climate change. I want to share with you some photos of our work. So when I say our work, I also need to mention that I'm part of collective, kind of Quilombo, based in Germany. We are community artists that are coming to work and to live together. We are at the moment more than 10 different nationalities, and we live together. Our name is Antagon Theatre Action, and our goal is to work in public space and be inspired by knowledges that are not coming from white Western society, also from a different references. And here what you see in the photos is also artistic research that we did inside of a Quilombola community in 2015. So our main goal was come closer to them to see how they engage, how they protect the nature, how they are surviving, and this is what I wanted to share with you a bit. So on the right side, you see like a way how they were squeezing oil, palm oil. Then in colonial times, it was also part of the enslaved labor to do this work. And for me, as Afro-descendants, is also a way of going back and search for the trace of identity. And for me, it's also about looking for a legacy of resilience, for a trace of a past. We are speaking a lot about the colonial ocean and the colonizing, for me, the gaze and the way how we understand things. So for me, this is also part of the Quilombola knowledge. And I don't know if it calls traditional knowledge, but it's a knowledge that for me means a lot in terms of switch the perspective of how human beings engage with environment, and how the way of creating a space for freedom, creating a space of democracy, is also a kind of earth democracy, like Vandana Shiva scholar is saying, how we somehow resisting against colonialism and not reproducing a power and a relationship and exploitation towards the nature. So this is what I have learned together with my collective, how we can somehow build another relationship with the so-called environment. And here I wanted to show you how we do that. So we go to communities, we create theater, workshops, a performance with the communities. Here on the side, you really see what they want to stage, what they want to make visible. So you see a fisherman with a lot of plastic bottles and the fishing nets. And this is something that for them is very important to say and to speak. And always when we go there, as an artist, we have the power of communication, the stage, the visibility, and we want to offer this to the to the voice for young people to speak. And the topic of environmental racism is coming always. In Bahia, where I come from, we had more than 100 communities, and to be recognized as a Quilombola community, you need also to apply, and the process takes time, and it's also a really fight with agrarian and with people with other interests that somehow are not related to ocean protection or environmental protection. I just want to read a little bit about the Ilha de Marés, a Quilombola community also based in Salvador, the Bahia. And there we have one of the blackest regions in the city, and is located to the port and also industrial complex. I have a photo that I will show to you, like a fisherman, and in the background you can really see like an oil refinery, and that's actually the conflict of interest that we are facing when we speak about those communities, because as I put in the presentation slide, they are really the guardians. They are the one who really say when something is contaminated, so water, the pollution, so they try to raise the voice, but they are getting more and more invisibilized, and even some of them are facing like political persecution or dangers of their own life because they wanted to warn the society that something is going wrong. And what we do, now coming back a little bit to my work as an artist, as a theater pedagogue, we try to stage this. We create in the last 15 years 4 different theater productions. And we, as Antagon, we work in public space with outreaching. And I will say that for me, performing arts is also the colonial language. Why? Because scientists, they develop a kind of language, a technical language to observe and describe and evaluate things, but normally it's not reaching the public. So the normal people that are not really engaged with this kind of language. And with performing arts, with the body, with emotions, we really try to create a connection with the topic that the citizens also of village, not only in these Quilombola communities that are more rural, but also in other villages, they try to understand and protect such communities. So our work in the last years was really to try to do that. So we created these performances, and when you see the picture in the middle, we were going on tour with the ship. So the picture of a ship for us is very important, especially our theater director in Germany, he built Bernhard Buch, I think he's also here, we'll show later. We built a ship really to create another meaning for our past as Afro-Brazilian, from the Black slave trades now to a ship in which we have a meaning for creativity, for expression, for imagination, and for ocean protection. So the main goal of our project was also to raise environmental awareness through Black culture identity. So it's 2 things to combine: ocean literacy and the colonial performing arts. And coming back a bit about the community, what we found there, I think we visit almost 20 Quilombola community in the last years. And we have time between 2 days to 15 days together, living with them, eating with them, going to see with them. And what we have discovered is a mix of precarity, so that they're really facing struggles like in living together, but also a lot of creativity. For example, some communities that are more organized, they are working with rural tourism, or they are also with some support of other NGOs or local government. They try to work with local artisanal like handcraft. And some other communities, of course, they are really dependent of the mangrove. And I think this is what I wanted to show. when we speak about artisanal fishing. Here is Diane Bonfim. What she told me is something that is very, very, very strong. For Diane Bonfim, shellfish gathering is not a profession, but rather a form of therapy. We work for ourselves, and no one have tell us when we have to leave or come back. Our boss is the moon and the wind. I think it's also connected with what we said in the beginning. The traditional knowledge or the knowledge that's coming from post-humanistic or post-anthropocentric reality. So this, I think, is what we try to connect as an artist and stage and give visibility. In the middle, you will see like a space in which they are selling their work and make also a sensorial garden, like to people to go through and smell herbs. It's really like this reconnection with nature, reconnection with plants. When we speak about Quilombola traditional knowledge, if we frame it like this, we also speak a lot about healing, because it's coming from a context in which people enslaved come together to survive, to resist, and to heal each other. So it's a lot of solidarity, it's a lot of connecting with the nature and find hope for a future. And of course, it's a lot of storytelling. As an artist, we love storytelling. And is for us, always when we arrive at the communities, we have a kind of ritual that we stop. We try to reach the oldest member of the Quilombola community, to listen, to understand, and also to get to know about the Afro-diasporic context, what we call the ancestrality, from where you come from, what you wanted to transmit to the new generation. So what is important for you, that the children and the ones who will come afterwards, they will follow and they will somehow develop in dialogue with this great society that we are living now, that work under technocrat path, but this is somehow a way of resistance and listen to our oldies. So this is a base of our work and mapping. And yeah, one thing that I think that we can frame, or I try to frame now to you, and what we believe is, of course, community-based workshop when we speak about creating dialogues. And one thing that for me is also important to mention is network building, not only between science and traditional, but also other fields, education, artists, social workers, that I think the way of creating ocean literacy needs to be beyond this binary relationship between local community and scientists. I mean, for me, the way is really to expand that everyone takes somehow a responsibility for sustainable future. And now I wanted to speak about my preferred topic. That's of course the anti-racist and sustainable future, what we understand. With our ship, what we created was really like through the experience, through the artistic research in those communities, we realized it's not only important to talk about inclusion, but explicitly about anti-racism, which means really to face the past and to talk about and to give a stage to climate justice, to also speaking about a positioning into this historical trauma that's coming, especially in Brazil, and I think in Latin America, the entire continent, the colonial exploitation that is somehow related. The way how they treat our bodies is also the way how the nature and the sources were treated, and one thing is connected to the other. So the objectification of the environment and the way of taking the spirituality, taking the life out of nature is for me the base of violence. And when we speak about racism, we speak also about objectification of other bodies, and also the inferiorization of the other bodies, and the categorization that allowed one group to have power to the other group. And I think this is for me the dialogue of colonial power and to nature, to environment, to ocean, and to human bodies. And for that, again, the ship, that's our strategy. The way of building and creating a physical space, a theater and cultural space in which we could question and give another narrative to ships that in the past transport human beings as products or as objects. Now we wanted to present Afro-diasporic bodies as protagonists of narratives and of resilience, and connected also their experience and their connection to the ocean as the main approach to do that. So instead of having very technical, dry scientific data, we would like to connect, for example, ocean action protections to the embodied experience of human beings who have been crossing the ocean since more than 300-400 years. And I would like just to show you some of the trace of the artistic work, because I'm an artist, is important. Not only to speak frontally, but also give you a picture about what we did. Try to make here the video. It's without sound, but at least you can have a picture of what we did.
Que vem através do projeto de Cura Criativa, trazendo formação artística e intercâmbio com o grupo de teatro Antagon da Alemanha, com grupos de jovens artistas daqui da Península Itapajipana do subúrbio. Atomistas da Península. Obrigada.
Okay, so I think my time is running. I will not show everything, but you can see later. People might think also we are talking about racism, about giving visibility and protagonism to Afro-descendants, and you see white people, white Germans in the video. This was exactly the challenge that we have, how to do this in the practice of creating international, like in the sense of intercultural dialogue, and really to give and to offer to white individuals the possibility to learn to support this process and to learn about white privilege, to learn about how being in contact in a space or be part of a process and with Black people empower themselves and not be afraid of this, of not to know what to do with that, but other way around, to really feel part of this. Because for us, or for me especially, because I'm pushing this process, when we speak about racism, we are speaking about a social problem in which each one needs to position and face what you can do as a person with your past, with your ancestrals, with your heritage to it. And here's the picture that I was mentioning. This is, you can see like a fisherman preparing to go to the sea, and in the back, this is in the Quilombola community, Ilha de Maré. You see this oil refinery that is polluting the whole water and space and contaminate the whole community. So this is somehow the kind of contradiction of a picture. And I want to finish with a question. Have you think about get to know a Quilombola community and be closer to them and learn from them? So this is what we want to do, a call for action. We want to join also other projects and also working closer with scientists, with environment activists, with people, for ocean protection and the colonial literacy. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Barbara. This was insanely interesting. I absolutely loved the work. And the thing that stood out to me the most was the shift in the meaning behind the symbol of the ship. You know, a lot of what you're saying, similar ancestry in the Caribbean and everything like that. And the ship, the ocean and everything has a strong negative connotation, right? So to really change that meaning so that people could be more engaged and to really use ocean literacy in a very powerful and cultural context specific way, I think it's very important. And to also spotlight the value of traditional knowledge. Like, that was like really great project that you have going on. I could go on and on and on about it, but we have two more speakers and I want to make sure that they get their time. So I will cut down on reading the bios. But next we have Kevan Kalapnath Maharaj. He is the managing director of I Am Movement, which is an environmental NGO based in Trinidad and Tobago, founded in 2014. Kevin has a background in chemical and process engineering from the University of the West Indies and is certified in project and facilities management. He has co-led the Caribbean Green Infrastructure Conference and has served as a dynamic platform for regional, no, WIT served as a dynamic platform for regional and international stakeholders to learn and understand green infrastructure and nature-based solutions alongside innovative climate finance mechanisms. So, Kevin, I just want to remind you that we have one more after you, so the floor is yours.
Thanks, Khadija, and thanks for the reminder. So let me just share my screen quickly. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy that I'm able to. Why am I right? Screen to share. Right, just confirming, seeing my screen, yeah? Yeah,
Yes,
great.
all good.
All right. So, as Khadija said, so I am from I Am Movement, and it's a non-profit organization. But before I get into that, just have a quick layout of the presentation today. So it's just four main parts: a little bit about I Am Movement, what is vetiver grass, and how it can be used as a ridge to reef intervention. A case study on a ridge to reef project that we did regionally within the Caribbean, and then a little bit on leachate remediation in Trinidad and Tobago. So I Am Movement, as Khadija mentioned, is an NGO that was founded in 2014. And our mission is really to facilitate and enlighten and empower the relationship between people and the environment. And we've been doing a lot of work in the climate adaptation, mitigation, and climate education space. So we have things like the Rethinking Energy series, the climate talks that we do in schools across Trinidad and Tobago, Suriname, and Guyana. We did the first People's Climate Marches in Trinidad and Tobago in 2014 and 2015, which aligned with key climate summits happening in Paris and New York at the time. And it really led to that shift. I think we really believed in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of really recognizing climate change and, of course, agreeing to the Paris Agreement and all these different things. So getting into it, vetiver grass, and there's a little bit of a nature-based solution or territorial nature-based solution. Are we talking about oceans? And I promise we're going to connect it soon. But vetiver grass is a plant species that is native to India. So it's actually documented in Trinidad. We have recorded documentation that it was here at least 70 years ago, but we know it's been here at least 200 years. And it's really and truly powerful because of its root length. So as you can see in the picture there, that the roots could actually grow up to 10 feet in depth. We've had situations where we've seen up to 15 feet. It's certified non-invasive, it's fire tolerant, and it's a C4 plant. So it actually absorbs an extra atom of carbon as compared to regular plants. So here I just have some pictures of what the root system looks like. We actually had a competition for one of our other projects in Trinidad and Tobago, and we had someone grow vetiver grass over the course of a 1-year period. This root actually was just about 8 feet. The winning root was actually 9 feet 6 inches, and it's looking very narrow there because it was actually grown in a 6-inch diameter PVC pipe, so it didn't get to spread out, right? And that's actually important because when you begin to use vetiver grass for soil and water related challenges, you really need to use it according to the vetiver system. So the vetiver system is really just planting the grass in a hedgerow formation along contour to have this myriad of benefits. So you have infrastructure protection, reduction in topsoil loss, protection of land, agricultural land regeneration, leachate treatment, groundwater recharge, livelihood creation. So it's really a very interesting grass species that allows for so much. So some of the benefits of vetiver grass is that, as I mentioned, the roots could grow up to 10 feet, has a deep and fibrous root system. So think about a retaining wall, but think about a retaining wall made out of roots, so underground, right? So all these things I went through before. The only thing I didn't touch on was that vetiver grass is a very powerful phytoremediator, and we'll get into that when we talk about the leachate treatment. So this is just a little bit of a diagram just showing how vetiver grass works. So as most slip surfaces happen about 3 meters below the surface of the soil, vetiver grass, when planted in hedgerow formation, actually goes to bind that slip surface area with the lower levels of soil. So it actually prevents the movement of land. So that's how vetiver grass has been used as a a tool to prevent land slippage in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the region. So this diagram just basically shows what I want to start getting into, which is the prevention of topsoil loss. And this was very essential for our Ridge to Reef project that we did within the Caribbean. So vetiver grass has actually been shown to hold back up to 1 foot of fast flowing water. So what that allows is actual groundwater recharge, but at the same time, it also holds back sediments from getting into rivers, which can then go downstream and get into your coastal areas, and of course, for sedimentation of reefs and stuff like that, right? So this is basically one of the pictures. As you can see, the height difference, so the natural terracing that occurs behind vetiver grass and vetiver hedgerows, right? So there is actual proof, scientific data to back up what I've been saying. So getting into the case study that I wanted to show today was our strengthening coastal and marine climate resilience through upland coastal ecosystem-based adaptation and community engagement. A lovely long name for the project. All of our projects tend to have long names, but quite fondly, this project became known as the Grassroots for la Vie project because it was really grassroots for life. And that was actually given by the community members because everything that we do, it's very community oriented, and we utilize a methodology called the vetiver education and empowerment model. So that would have led to over 210,000 plants being planted directly upstream, 180 direct trained participants across 6 communities, 8 green businesses being registered, vetiver system workshops, handicraft workshops, again, just empowering communities to learn about vetiver grass and being able to implement it on their own. So these were some of the islands that we tackled. So we have Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, and we were in Tobago, in Trinidad and Tobago, right? So just bringing it into Antigua and Barbuda, just getting into the leachate side of things, what we actually did was we went to the Cook's landfill. So as you can see, and in most Caribbean territories, you would see that landfills are located very close to coastal zones, right? So very close to the oceans, very close to the beaches, or very close to waterways. That's just one of the realities that we face as small island developing states, that we don't have much land to utilize to place our landfills, right? So there's just an aerial photo of the Cook's landfill. As you can see, there's a lot of there's actually a mangrove forest located at the base of the landfill. So what we did is we actually went in and we installed vetiver grass in hedgerow formation. As you can see, some community members planting the grass in straight lines and a little bit of an angle, because this was the main area that the leachate was seeping through to the mangrove area. And as you can see here, right, it's a little bit of a higher image where we've been able to capture leachate there and reduce the amount of leachate being entered into the mangrove area. We've seen the vetiver leaves actually begin to turn purple from the toxins from the leachate. So you can know that it was actually working to remediate leachate that is leaving the area of the landfill, right? And then just to bring it to Trinidad and Tobago, so having seen this, we've actually been able to replicate an artificial wetland. So as you can see here, this is in Forest Park in Trinidad, and those black ponds that you see there are leachate ponds. So the circular pond is the main leachate pond. In between, you're seeing like a green square or rectangle, that's the vetiver grass. And then on the left, we have the outflow from the artificial wetland. So what we did is we created an artificial wetland using vetiver grass. So what we did is we engineered the wetland by putting an impermeable layer at the bottom, filling it with gravel or rock, then putting a clay layer, soil, and then vetiver on top. So what is essentially supposed to happen is the vetiver is going to grow down into the gravel layer and interact with the leachate that is flowing through the system. Now, we have seen tremendous results. I just want to make one little caveat, is that the retention time was a bit longer than we anticipated initially because our outflow valve was giving some trouble. But these were the type of results that we were getting, right? So you're seeing on the left, the leachate being this black, very forbidden mobby, as the team calls it, liquid. But on the right, after it's passed through the system, what it has been able to do is actually remediate the leachate, remove most of the heavy metals, toxins, etc. So now you have a bit of a cleaner liquid going down and further into the environment. And then lastly, just a touch. So this was a coastal protection project that we had in Queenham, where you could see there's heavy coastal erosion happening. And with the Ministry of Public Utilities and Coastal Protection Unit, we were able to make a hybrid approach. So it's not just vetiver grass, but it's also with gabion baskets, rock baskets, terracing, benching, etc., and vetiver grass to stabilize the slopes. And it has been working for numerous years now. So it shows that vetiver grass is a viable alternative to a typical green infrastructure solutions. And that's where you really see traditional knowledge of vetiver grass merging with science, where you have green infrastructure solutions and being replaced with nature-based solutions, or even being a hybrid solution where you have a mix of both in this case. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch very quickly. We've developed an app called the We Climate app, and it has all the information on vetiver grass. It even has access to all the educational videos we would have produced on vetiver grass. And please make sure to check out our website. We have a film room, so if you're interested in learning more about this regional project, as well as projects that we've done in the past, we have almost all of our projects do have short videos or documentaries. So thank you very much, everyone. I really hope you all enjoyed the presentation. Thanks, Khadija.
Thank you very much. Oh, my voice. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was really great and an excellent example of a nature-based solution, as well as really incorporating that nature-based solution with the community and innovation. And I know we technically have 5 minutes left, but the organizers told me that we can go over time. So this is unfortunately a trend that I was so sure was not going to happen in this session, but it did. And I guess that's just what happens when you have amazing people and amazing conversations. So I can't do much about that. But I will jump straight to our last speaker, and then I will ask everyone if they could hold on for the next 5 to 10 minutes to really give Alexandre his moment to shine, and so that we could all hear his presentation as well. So Alexandre De Silva is a Brazilian engineer with a postgraduate qualification in business administration. I'm trying to rush. Let me take it slow. Andre De Silva is a Brazilian engineer with a postgraduate qualification in business administration, a scuba diver instructor, and by the end of this year will hold a master's degree in ocean science and technology with a focus on coastal governance and tourism. He's the founder and president of Associao Transformar, the hub leader for SOA Campinas, and coordinator of the Transformar project, which is a UN Ocean Decade endorsed action. He works with schools, coastal communities, and to co-design meaningful ocean experiences that restore belonging and confidence and empower communities to demand effective change from their leaders. He has over a decade in experience, and with that, Alexandre, the floor is yours.
Hi, Khadija. Thank you. I cannot open my video. I don't know what's happening. There's something wrong here. Could you help me? You cannot start your video because work. I think it's working. Thank you.
We can see you now. Yeah.
Perfect. Would like to begin by thanking the Rise Up for the organization of these events, for the invitations, to my fellow panelists and everyone who is following this important discussion. My name is Alexandre da Silva. I work on the Southwest Atlantic coast in Brazil with coastal communities and indigenous people who live very close to the sea, but who is in practice often feel distant from it. Today, I'm speaking, however, in Belém, where I'm participating in COP30 in person. Here in Belém, we can feel how much is at stake. The city has been taken over by delegations, civil society, youth groups, traditional and indigenous leaders who can not only to follow the negotiations, but to demand that their reality and proposal are taken seriously. For the first time here, we have a dedicated ocean space, and the ocean's issues are not only inside events, they are present at the core of the COP negotiations. Almost 80 countries have already agreed to bring the ocean into their NDCs and climate committees, which is a major victory for the oceans. And over these days in Belém, alongside the negotiations and side events, there also been a series of protests led above all by indigenous peoples, calling for greater participation in climate governance and stronger protection of their territory. In the corridors between one event and another, many people have asked what we think about this process, whether we agree to them, and what is my position, for example. And these questions usually come into short pauses when there is no time to build a thoughtful and complex answer. So I like to use the time here to share a bit of the story of the Transformar and the Caiçara. Caiçara is artisanal fishers in the southwest of Brazil and indigenous communities that we work with. And to add this experience to the valuable reflections of my colleagues, so that you yourselves can arrive at an answer that is not so simple. How can climate and ocean governance bring to the center the voices of people whose histories and ways of life already show that it's possible to develop without destroying the climate or reaching the planet? So, through the Associação Transformar, we work with villages, schools, local teachers, and managers of marine protected area to co-create ocean experience. What I want to share today is not a polished model, but a path under constructions with lessons that can speak to other contexts in Latin American, Caribbean, and other regions of the world. In many of the communities where we work, the ocean is part of a history, identity, spirituality, but in the recent decades have brought stigma, displacement, and fear. Access to the sea has become an expensive product. The beach has been turned into an exclusive place, marked by consumption and by disputes with large tourism and real estate projects. Many people live just a few minutes from the water, yet they have never entered in the sea. Never been on a boat. Never been on a boat. And the connection with the ocean-related ancestry and traditional knowledge is fading. Even in protected area, there are still major difficulties in managing both the territory on the land and the sea territory. They should recognize that should be recognized as part of these communities, the way of life and very existence. In Portuguese, we have a word, an academic word for this. We call maretoio, which means in literal translation, something like sea plus territory. Traditional communities are the real guardian of these areas. But when we impose rules to make them fit into our models of territory management, we are punishing these communities for a degradation they did not cause. At the same time, marine protected areas are often governed in a top-down way, reproducing colonial patterns of governance. Decisions are taken in distance office in technical language, and communities are treated as users to be controlled rather than as guardians and holders of the knowledge. This combination of historical trauma, regulatory pressures, and lack of voice creates a social distance from the oceans. Our work seeks to reduce this distance, reconnecting people with the sea in a way they want are safe, meaningful, and political empowered. Our pathway is simple, informed but intense in practice. We always start with schools and with local teachers because they already have the trust of the families and they know the everyday reality of each community. Together, we co-create a sequence of experience that take place on land, at the water's edge, and in the sea. On land, we work with stories, maps, and local memories so that children and young people can see themselves in the history of their territory. At water edge and in activities under the sea, we create a carefully prepared moments so that they can experience the ocean as something that also belongs to them, not only as a place for tourists and consumptions. Through this, through this experience, we seek to awaken in these people an understanding that territory should be governed by people who live there. That the sustainability of the region is closely linked to traditional practice, and that sustainable development cannot be separated from social development. There is no sustainable development based only in technology and financial resources if there is no, at the same time, social development. We have been working with highly vulnerable coastal communities since 2018. In 2024, we also began to work with 2 indigenous villages on the northern coast of São Paulo and south of Rio de Janeiro. In the Caiçara communities, we have been present for longer. The main challenge is exclusion driven by real estate speculations, violence associated with criminal factions disputing territories, and the absence of any clear perspective of future. There is a lack of access to quality education and even to local tradition and knowledge. In this community, we have a history of engagement in qualitative data that indicates a significant increase in knowledge about the ocean and social mobilization. Young people who haven't taken part directly in our activity actions today organize engagement campaigns to seek more sustainable living conditions in their territories. Some of these young people have entered leading universities here in Brazil, which makes us very proud because it shows that it's possible to build a more sustainable society by integrating academic knowledge and traditional knowledge. In 2024, we started working with 2 indigenous villages, a process that we had to interrupt in 2025 due to the lack of resources. And we will resume it in 2026. In this territory, we found a deep tradition of connection with the ocean, but at the same time, a distance caused by a strong social stigma and prejudice against indigenous peoples. Alongside extreme poverty, there was a barrier marked by fear and discrimination. For many families, the sea had become associated with conflict and clashes with the non-indigenous population. The community were confined to their villages because their language and the way of life were not accepted by surrounding population. This pattern is present in the both villages we work with. One of them was pushed inland from the coast as luxury, high-priced beachfront property took over the shoreline. The second one lie less than 2 kilometers from the sea, yet its residents almost never reach the beach. Over time, many families stopped going to the shore after repeated episodes of hostility from non-indigenous residents and visitors. When we take them to the sea and create a carefully prepared moments of deep contact with the oceans, something powerful emerges. elders start sharing with young people stories that everyday pressures had pushed aside. Stories about the ocean, about the past, about their ancestors, and about how important the sea is for the community. Kerechu, one of the leaders in the Upatuba village, once told me how present the ocean is in Guarani Ambria culture, yet how distant it has become for many young people. One of the movements they are trying to build in the village is to recover their history, traditions, which have been under attack for many years. As a concrete example, she speaks with sadness about the fact that their traditional indigenous names often cannot be registered in official documents. So each person ends up with an official name and another name by which they are truly known. Sorry. So what is trying to do is to create an unforgettable shared memory. And we take many members of the village as possible and to the boat and to provide them associated with a very intense scuba diving experience and a very high quality content about the ocean related subjects. We try to keep this memory alive, of this experience alive in this mind, and you try to anchor this experience on how they can start to fighting for their rights to the land and for their territory. This work to me is a small example of what means to bring science and traditional knowledge closer together from the colonial perspective. It's not just about translating community stories into technical reports, not about simplifying scientific articles. It's about sharing power over how problems are defined, over what counts as evidence, and over who has the right to speak in ocean spaces. To summarize, I think I'm already had given an idea of what we are trying to say. I know we are in hush, and maybe I invite you to know our work through our website, transformar.eco. Thank you for the time, Khadija, and thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Alexandre. And I know you are in Belém, so thank you for taking the time and joining us and really sharing the importance of like what it means to create a meaningful experience, right? Because a lot of the times we forget facts and figures and words, but we do remember how we felt and we do remember different experiences. So the fact that that's something that you really focus on in your work and making sure that, you know, school children, teachers, all the communities that you engage with have a positive relationship with the ocean, then that is very important. And I also love the basically three pillars, I would say, where you work on land, work on the sea edge, and work on the sea itself. I think that is an incredible model to have. And I just want to really and truly thank all our speakers today for joining and for having this very fruitful conversation. It's so interesting that when we first had this proposal, the theme of decolonizing the ocean and everything else was not present. It was just about really cross-regional knowledge sharing on solutions related to the ocean and climate space. And again, bridging that science with traditional knowledge. But as we tap into that concept of traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, especially in these two regions, colonization was an emerging theme that just came out in a very big way. And it was so important for us to hold space to have this conversation and to really, like I said in the beginning, name the thing that oftentimes goes unnamed and see how we are addressing some of these systematic barriers that in place, but how we are also, you know, being creative and moving forward despite these challenges and really fighting for a just ocean as well as climate and environment, just a livable future in general. So I would like to thank all of you all for all the participants, everybody who joined, the speakers for really and truly taking time. And if you're interested in connecting with the panelists afterwards, feel free to reach out. would ask Katie to drop their contact in the chat. But if not, feel free to reach out to us on Rise Up or connect with some of the organizations directly, and really and truly continue having this conversation, continue connecting. We can't do it alone. SDG 17 partnerships is all about partnerships and really amplifying and scaling up and out some of the already existing solutions. So with that, I would like to say everyone have a good evening, a good night. Enjoy the rest of your day. And remember, with the Ocean and Climate Cluster, we're really and truly going to keep this conversation and keep the momentum moving and keep bringing up some of these hard-hitting themes in the ocean and climate space, because by doing that, that's how we affect change, right? By really naming and understanding some of these systematic barriers. So thank you, everyone. And I'll see you in the next webinar that we decide to have. So bye.